have this issue a lot? Why do I have to deal with this every day?
I gave you my one you gave me yesterday.
They keep some in your locker.
I don't have none. That's
Then get some.
point.
I know, I understand that. But get some. Okay. 5.2. So this is lesson 5.2. Not a ton of notes today. Again, Unit 5, the test will be Tuesday. It's a short lesson. It's a short unit. There's only 3 lessons. Like I said last week, you can use on Tuesday on the test, you can use your notes and your homework from this unit. So make sure you are keeping track, more important than normal. Not only am I going to take a grade for Unit 5 notes, easy 10 points, I'm also going to let you use it on the test. So make sure you are keeping track of Unit 5 notes. Make sure you are filling them in. If you are absent, you're getting on Google Classroom and filling them in. So make sure you are keeping track of these. I'll give you extra blank ones, but I'm not going to give you a filled in one. So make sure you keep track of these. So inverse variation, direct variation we did on Wednesday. What did direct variation look like? Direct variation we did Wednesday. What did it look like? What's the equation look like for direct variation? Get your notes out from Monday. You're close. Oh yeah, so you're right. K equals y over x. So my constant of variation, you take y divided by x. What did the equation look like? Y equals kx. The inverse variation. What does the word inverse mean? It's a fancy math word. It is the what?
Reversed.
Reversed, or the opposite. So we're going to use that same thought process with what we're doing today. So the inverse variation is the opposite of direct variation. So it is a specific relationship in which there is a constant product. Product means what? Multiplication. So it's going to be x times y. So my constant k, instead of being y over x like direct, it is the inverse, so it's going to be x times y. So it is the opposite of direct. Direct was y divided by x. Inverse is x times y. What? Okay, now the equation is also opposite. The direct variation equation was y equals kx, so the inverse will be what? If direct was y equals kx, inverse will be y equals... It's the opposite. What's the opposite of k times x? K over x. Okay? So the inverse variation is the opposite, which is what inverse means, of direct. So the constant is x times y instead of y divided by x, and my equation, instead of y equals k times x, is y equals k over x. So same idea, just with different equations. And like I said, you won't have to have direct and inverse memorized. You'll be able to use your notes on the test next week. First thing I need to do is I need to find the constant. Identify the constant of the ordered pairs below, then write the equation. So 2 things I need to find. Constant is k. I need to find what k equals, and then I need to write the equation. So the equation for inverse is y equals k over x. So find k and then plug it in. So just like we did on Wednesday, except we're doing inverse instead of direct. Okay, let's look at number 1. Look at number 1. I need to find the constant. K equals what? Well, what's the k equals what times what? X times y. So if k equals x times y, you're just going to multiply your x and y together. 1 times 20, 20. And all of the ordered pairs will be the same. 2 times 10, 20. 4 times 5, 20. So my k value is 20. So that's the first part. And then my equation is going to be y equals 20 over x. That is it. Same idea, except we are multiplying x and y instead of dividing them, which makes it a little easier, actually. That's it for the first part. Let's look at 3. Again, I want to find my k value. K is x times y. If it's inverse, k is x times y. So look at your ordered pairs and start multiplying them. Negative 5 times 2.4. If that's hard for you to do, look at the other ones. Negative 3 times 4. Negative 2 times 6. Negative 1 times 12. K is negative 12. I know you haven't seen, we haven't talked about inverse variation much, but literally it's multiplying your x and y together to find K. Logan, keep your head up, please. Thank you. My equation, I need to find K and I need the equation. Equation will be y equals negative 12 over x. Okay? Any questions on this stuff? Okay, we're going to do graphing, and then I'm going to give you time to start the homework. Graphing is a little more complicated. Doable, it's a little more complicated. So, if I graph an inverse variation, first of all, whenever you're graphing an inverse, for what we're going to do today, you will have an asymptote, fancy math word, at y equals 0, or sorry, that's x equals 0, at x equals 0, and y equals 0. What I mean, I'm drawing dashed lines. That's y equals 0. Okay? So what I'm doing first, anytime we draw an inverse for this class, you're going to have an asymptote, a vertical asymptote at x equals 0, and a horizontal asymptote at y equals 0. So make sure you're writing this down. So one of the characteristics is we're going to have asymptotes. Now all an asymptote means, they are dashed lines. It means my graph cannot go past that dashed line. So these dashed lines are kind of like the boundaries of my graph. My graph cannot cross those asymptotes, at least for this class. So anytime you're graphing an inverse, you're going to have asymptotes. Vertical one at y equals 0, x equals 0, horizontal at y equals 0. So you can always draw those dashed lines. And now I need to graph it. Now, what it tells me the constant of an inverse variation is 16. It tells you the constant. I know my constant, or K, is equal to what times what? For inverse, my constant is equal to what times what?
Y over X.
My constant. What is my constant equal to? No, my constant. Look at the top. For an inverse, my constant is equal to what?
0.
I wrote it down. Look up at the top. I have K equals what? No.
16. Y
No.
equals K over X.
Nope. Look at the top. I wrote it down. K equals what? X times Y. If you didn't write this down, you need to. K equals X times Y. Don't write stuff down, just write stuff down. Write it down. So my constant for an inverse variation is X times Y. So if they tell you your constant is 16, that tells me that 16 is equal to X times Y. So as you look at making a table, all of your X and Y values should multiply to give you positive 16. That's what inverse means, is your X times your Y gives you 16. So as I make a t-chart, we're going to kind of have two separate t-charts, one to deal with the negatives and one to deal with the positive. So I'm not going to start with 0. I cannot have a 0 value for X because of the asymptote. So I'm going to start with 1, 2. Now be careful, because I need to pick X values that can multiply nicely to give me 16, because I have to take X times Y to give me 16. What's another number that multiplies nicely to get me 16? 4. What's another one? 8. And another one would be 16. Okay? So you want to pick nice numbers, because I have to take X times Y to give me 16, so you have to pick nice numbers, so even numbers. Well, not just even, but 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. Now let's think about this. Don't make this harder than it is. 1 times what gives me 16? 16, so Y is 16. So the way you find your Y value is you think, I know X times Y has to give me 16 because it's the constant. So you just think to yourself, 1 times 16 gives me 16. 2 times what gives me 16? 4 times what gives me 16? 8 times what gives me 16? 16 times what gives me 16? 1. Okay? So that's how you make a table. I know it's kind of different. But, yeah, basically you just switch. But yeah, the way you think about it is X times Y has to give me 16. So let's graph this. What's one order pair I have? 1, 16. So if you notice, I go by 2's. So if I look at my graph, my interval goes by 2's. So if I graph 1, it's halfway. and then up 16. So it's going to be something like that. So if you graph 116, it's halfway between 0 and the first interval, which is 2, and then up 16. The next one is 2, 8. So to the first hash mark, up 8. 4, 4. So over to 4, up 4. 8, 2. Over 8, up 2. And 16, 1. So right 16 and then about halfway up. And you're going to draw the asymptote mean. The graph's going to get closer to it, but not actually cross it. So this is what your inverse graph looks like. It has that curve. Okay? I know it's kind of weird. So inverse is easy and the graphs get a little tricky, but it is doable. Okay? So inverse will always have asymptotes and you're going to have a curve. Now, there's another side to this we have to think about as well. We have to think about my negative x values. So you're going to make 2 t-charts, and your second t-chart is going to be negative x values. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 4, negative 8, negative 16. So one t-chart will be positive x values, one will be negative x values. Let me know if you need help with this. I know it's kind of weird, but you guys can do this. Now, we know my constant of variation has to stay 16. So negative 1 times what gives me positive 16? Negative 16. It's the same thought process, but since I multiply x is a negative, y also has to be a negative to get back a positive 16. Yeah, negative 2 times what gives me positive 16? Negative 8. Negative 4 times? Negative 4. Negative 8 times? And negative 16 times? Negative 1. I know it's kind of weird, but you guys can do this. It's multiplying x times the y. X times what gives me positive 16. Any questions on that? Okay, how do you graph it? You have ordered pair. So negative 1, negative 16. You go left 1. You're good. Yeah, it's kind of weird, but you've done this stuff before. You've graphed. Let me get my... Okay, negative 1, negative 16. I go left 1, which is halfway, down 16. So something like right there. Negative 2, negative 8. So negative 2, negative 8. Right there. Okay? So make sure you check your intervals because they're going to be a little off. Negative 4, negative 4. Negative 8, negative 2. And negative 16, negative 1, which is halfway. So something like that. So again, a characteristic of inverse is you're going to have curves like this. So you can draw and connect your points, and your curves are getting closer to your asymptote. So that's what inverse looks like. You're going to have that same kind of pattern with inverse. Direct, what did we get when we graphed a direct variation? It was always a what? Think back to Wednesday. The graphs of direct variations were always what? Put your notes if you need to. The graph of direct variations were always what? No? Go back and look at your notes. If I had y equals 2x, or y equals 4x, or y equals 5x, the graph was always a what? Straight what? Straight line. So for a direct, your graphs are straight lines. For inverses, they're going to be these weird curves. Okay? Let's look at one more graph, and then we're going to have you start your homework.
What's so weird about it?
Well, it's just we haven't graphed anything like this. Okay, let's look at 6. Okay, I want to graph the inverse that has a constant of variation of negative 36. First of all, draw your asymptotes. So you have a dashed line vertically. You don't have to, but it's nice to, as you draw your graph, they're going to be there. So if you don't put the dashed lines, I don't really care. But I like putting them in the notes so you know x can never be 0 because it can never touch 0. So you never start with x being 0 because it can't touch it. Okay, we're making 2 t-charts. First of all, my constant of variation is a negative. So now they have to multiply to give me a negative number. So first, a positive t-chart and a negative t-chart. So we're going to pick about 4 or 5 x values. Let's start with positive x values. First x value to start with, 1. You can always start with 1. Don't start with 0 because I have an asymptote. X cannot be 0. So I start with x is 1. I want to pick numbers that multiply into 36. So my second number would be 2. Next one?
6.
You could use 6. You could also use 4. We'll use 4. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what numbers you use as long as you pick numbers that multiply into 36. 6. What would be the next one? No. You can pick. 8 doesn't go into 36. 12 or 9. So you have some options. 18 would work. So pick 5, 4 or 5. I would pick 5. Let's say pick 5 numbers that multiply into 36. Now, let's think about this. My constant of variation is negative 36. So negative 36 equals x times y. That's the formula. So if your constant of variation is equal to x times y. So I have my x value, so I need to think to myself, 1 times what gives me negative 36? Negative 36. Okay, so a positive 1 times a negative 36 gives me negative 36. 2 times what gives me negative 36? Use a calculator if you need to.
18.
2 times what gives me a negative 36? Negative 18. So make sure you keep track of the negative. 4 times what gives me negative 36? Negative 9. 6 times what gives me negative 36?
Negative 6.
And 12 times what gives me a negative 36? Negative 3. Okay, so if I get these ordered pairs graph, 1, negative 36. So negative 36 is off, you can just kind of estimate. So I go right 1, which is halfway, down 36, which is somewhere down here. Just kind of estimate. It doesn't have to be perfect if it goes off the graph. 2, let me zoom in a little bit. 2, 18, so right 2, down 18, which is between 16 and 20. 4, negative 9, which is a little bit after negative 8. 6, negative 6, which is right there. And 12, negative 3, so right there. So again, inverse has that curve. You should notice that you have a curve like this. Okay. Any questions on the positive side? Positive x values. Now do the same thing, but do negative x values. And I would choose the same x values, just make them negative. So negative 1, negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, negative 12. 2 tables. I know it's kind of a little bit of work. You guys can do this, though. It's multiplying numbers together. It's graphing points. Well, let's think about this. So you have a positive x t-chart and a negative x t-chart. Now let's think about this. Negative 1 times what gives me a negative 36? Negative 1 times a positive 36. So since they have to multiply to give me a negative, since my x's are negative, all my y's have to be positive. Negative 2 times what gives me negative 36? Positive 18. Negative 4 times what gives me negative 36? Positive 9. So if you pick the same x values, your y values will be the same. The signs might be different. Negative 6 times what gives me negative 36? Positive 6. Negative 12 times what gives me negative 36? Positive 3. So if you choose the same x values, just make them negative, then your y values will be the same. And then let's graph this. Negative 1, 30. Okay, any questions so far? I want to make sure I catch questions. Okay, graph these ordered pairs. Negative 1, 36. So left 1, up 36. Just estimate where it'll be. If it goes off, just estimate it. Negative 2, 18. So halfway between 16 and 20. Negative 4, 9. So a little bit past 8. Negative 6, 6. So halfway between negative 4 and 8 and up. Like that. Negative 12, 3. Negative 12, up 3. Something like that. So your points don't have to be exactly, but you should notice that I have the curve. Something like that. Okay. Any questions on that? And you notice when your constant of variation is negative, they're flipped. So instead of these two when they're positive, it's these two when they're negative. Okay? Any questions? I know it's kind of weird. The first part's easier, graphing's a little harder. The next part will be easier than direct. But okay, let me pass out the homework. You only have 2 graphs on the homework because I know they take a little bit of time. So go ahead and do the front page of the homework, 1 through 6.
You mean there's a backside to it?
Yep. Yeah. Load up to the finish. So front page on the homework. I know the graphing takes a little bit of time, but the math, you guys can do the math. You can do it. So I need to see both T charts, positive X values and negative X values. I'm blanking on it. Okay, so front page on the homework. I'm going to give you about 10 or 15 minutes to get that done. There's only 6 questions. 1 through 4 doesn't take very long. So. Okay, thank you. Who needs one? Show.
We need another one.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so front page of the homework. The graphing, the 1 through 4 are pretty straightforward, the constant equation. The graphing takes a little bit of time, but it's doable. So use your time. I'm going to collect this by the end of the block, so use your time wisely today because you don't have a ton of extra time.
Oh, yeah.
So make sure, don't waste time with music because I still want it by the end of the block. So. That's it, 24, your constant. Your constant is just y times x. Again, I just want those by the end of the block, so I'm hesitant to let you go because we don't have time. And then your equation is just y equals k over x. So just put y equals and then your constant over x. That's it. Does that make sense, why? Yeah. So 1 through 4 are pretty straightforward. 1 through 4 should take you like a minute because they really don't take much time at all.
Changes time.